Good evening. A special meeting of the Board of Trustees of Socorro Independent School District will be held Tuesday, March 20th, 2023, beginning at 5:30. On March 28th, the time is 5:30 again. And will you please join me for Pledge of Allegiance? We have established a quorum. Ready? Begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. At this time, we
Mr.
will
Mena?
proceed. Yes. Go ahead.
Before we start the board meeting, could we observe a moment of silence for the victims of the Covenant shooting in Nashville, please?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nakata, for bringing that
Thank you,
up.
sir.
At this time, we'll proceed with board honors. Mr. Daniel Escobar.
Good evening, President Mena, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Carmen. My name is Daniel Escobar, Chief Communications Officer for the district, and it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's recognitions. If you'll please step down to receive our honorees. First, we will recognize the winners of the top prize at Robocom 9.0. These bright young students earned the coveted Inspire Award for their ability to problem solve through programming, coding, and teamwork to build a successfully functioning robot out of Legos. Congratulations to the Clark Cowboys Future Energy Sources from Captain Walter E. Clark Middle School. Zoe Andazola Garcia. Eduardo Duran. Guillermo Parada. And their coach, Jose Andazola. If we can have you back to the front for a photo here. And just a quick note, while they're gathering for that photo, that all of the portraits taken by our district photographer, Mr. Largo, they're posted on the district website. There's a camera icon on the bottom right-hand corner of the webpage. That'll take you to SmugMug, and those photos are available there for a free high-resolution download. Keep smiling. You got it? All right, congratulations once again. Next, we recognize 4 SISD students for earning top spots in the 2023 Black History Month Art Contest. The artwork created by students in 2 school districts honored outstanding achievements in African American history, including athletes, artists, political activists, and more. More than 200 students from Socorro ISD and Isleta ISD participated in the contest. Congratulations to these talented artists. From Bill Seibert School, Nicole Patton. Also from Bill Seibert, Juliet Piper. Their teacher is Rebecca Candelaria Conde. From William D. Slider Middle School, Andres Garcia. Teacher, Cindy Martinez. And from Socorro High School, Liliana Reza. And her art teacher is Lourdes Aguilar. Students, teachers, if we can please have you back up to the front. And though the portraits are posted online, parents, you are welcome to step up and take your photos for tonight if you'd like as well. Congratulations once again. Our next recognition honors an SISD flute choir that was selected to participate in the 2023 Texas Music Educators Association Convention in San Antonio, Texas. These talented musicians were selected among an elite few to perform at the annual conference. Congratulations to the Pebble Hills High School Flute Choir. They are Maraliz Alvarado Garcia, Manuel Arredondo, Jessica Castillo Alvarado, Alizé Chavez, Zarela Coelho, Imelda del Toro, Valeria Hernández, Javier Márquez, Alexandra Miranda, Gabriel Montes, Kiani Olvera, Venus Pham, Isabel Ponce, Nicole Ramirez, Gabriela Rivera Castro, Sofia Sierra, Riley Valenzuela. We have Cecil Crabtree Spring, the director. And Dan Hunt. If we can have you all back up to the front for a photo, please. Five. Oh yeah, Dan Hunt. Okay, no worries. Thank you. Keep smiling, looking straight ahead. Congratulations once again. Next, we recognize 10 outstanding students who were named 2023 Texas Music Educators Association All-State Musicians. This recognition highlights students in jazz band, and choir. These students are among the top 2% of musicians across the state of Texas to be selected for this honor. Congratulations to these inspiring young musicians. From America's High School, Alisa excuse me. Rocio Manriquez. Bianca Magallanes. Nathan Olivas. They were from East Lake High School. From El Dorado High School, we have Micah Alberto Carrasco. Also from El Dorado, Alexa Ortiz Hernandez. Their director is Carl Ortega. Also from El Dorado High School, Isabella Eileen Kelly. Director is Tiffany Harper. From Pebble Hills High School, Santiago Alvarez. And also from Pebble Hills High School, Jacob Ocampo. Continuing with students from Pebble Hills High School, Javier Marquez. And Sebastian Contreras. If we can have you all back to the front for a photo, please. Hold the smiles, hold the smiles. All right, congratulations one more time. Our final recognition honors an SISD girls basketball team for earning a UIL 6A by-district championship. The team won a thrilling playoff game 53-52 against San Angelo Central to capture their championship. Congratulations to the Pebble Hills High School girls varsity basketball team. Sofia Olguin. Valerie Loredo. Chrysalin Madaleno. Miley Marrero. Nadine Pimentel. Jennifer Ruiz. Jordan Sapien. Crystal Talavera. Kiana Valdez. Andrea Vasquez. Andromeda Hueregue. Olivia White. The coaches are Elizabeth Duran, Stephanie Estrada, and they're led by head coach Stephen Lee. And their number one cheerleader. If we can have you back up to the front for a photo, please. Oh. What? Did we get it up? Did we get it? One more picture. One more picture. One more picture. Congratulations once again. Thank you. And that concludes our recognitions for this evening. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Public comment. Oh, it's not for new, until new business. Okay, I'm just waiting for everybody to exit the room. And we will go on to 5, Board Workshop. Presenter, Mr. Vicky Perez.
Good evening, President Mena, members of the board, Dr. Carmen. My name is Vicky Perez, Chief Financial Officer. This evening, we do have a presentation from Weaver and Tidwell, and I'd like to invite Mr. Travis Kastner up.
Yep. Good evening, Dr. Carmen and members of the board. This presentation that I'm giving tonight is the culmination of phase 1 of the forensic audit. And so really the goal here is to summarize the responses that we received through the interview and the questionnaire process and kind of go through that and get feedback. It's intended to be a discussion and to ultimately get some guidance on defining the scope, which was really the goal of phase 1. So for this presentation, I'm gonna first go over the process that we went through during phase 1, go over a summary level of the responses, then more detailed review, and then provide some cost information, which again is very preliminary and intended for discussion purposes only. So just to give some background on the process, I know that, it's been a little while, but just as a refresher, so on March 8th, we emailed a blank questionnaire to the board, to all the board members, and essentially gave them the option. It was voluntary if they wished to participate. And for any board member that did want to participate, they could either submit their responses to the questionnaire, or we would conduct an interview with those board members. And we requested for that to be provided by March 24th. If board members did not want to participate, we also let them know they could respond that they did not wish to participate. So as of Friday, March 24th, we have received responses from 5 board members, 3 of which were interviews, and then 2 questionnaires that were received. And so the summary that I'm going to go through this evening is based on the 5 responses and between questionnaires and interviews that we received.
Brenna,
Yes, go ahead.
quick question. Mr. Travis, I forgot your last name. I'm sorry.
It's Kasner.
Kasner. Who are the 2 board members that didn't participate?
So as part of our process, what we said was that we were not going to identify, who participated and who didn't. It was intended to be voluntary. So I haven't, in this presentation, mentioned any board members' names, and all the scores are reflective of the aggregate for the 5. I don't know that I want to be the one to mention that, but, that's just because of when we laid it out, it was
Okay.
Intended to be voluntary, and that we wouldn't reveal, to the other board members, who provided what information, who participated, who didn't. So, if it's okay with you, I'd rather not provide the names.
Okay.
So the first part of this scoping process was to go over the review period and elicit input from the board as far as the time frame, is a critical piece of this. So we provided options of whether it's, anywhere from 1 year to 5 years. So 1 year being the most recent fiscal year ended 2022. And then the 5-year range would be going back to fiscal year ended 2018 through fiscal year 2022. And then we also provided 14 different scope of work categories and asked the board to rate their level of concern or interest in including that item as part of the scope for the phase 2 of the forensic audit. And then we aggregated that information, and that's what we're going to go through next. So for the first part related to the review period, so this chart, out of the 5, we actually there were 4 responses. One of them, the question wasn't filled out, and we tried to contact the board member to get the response, but at this point we haven't received that. But from the 4 responses, we had 3 that were in that 5-year review period, and then 1 that was in the 2-year review period. So that was, covering the review period. And then this is a summary of the rankings for the 14 scope of work categories. And essentially what we did, just to provide the background on the scoring, is, on the questionnaire we list, if there's level of concern none, which was 0 points, low would be 1, moderate would be 2, and then high would be 3. And so for the 5 responses, we basically totaled those, and then these are the aggregate scores and points that are ranked across the 14. So the highest would be 15 points, then the lowest would be 0. So just a real quick run through these. There was both construction expenditures and bond fund expenditures were both the highest, and then those are actually, very similar in overlap in scope with 13 points. Next, third was hiring practices. Then federal funds and grants, which was tied with employee compensation and stipends. The next one's purchasing and procurement practices, and then records and retention practices, and then employee travel expense reimbursements, and then maintenance expenditures, technology expenditures, curriculum and instruction expenditures, credit card expenditures, then transportation expenditures, and then athletic expenditures. And then we also gave the board an opportunity to, if there was items where they had an interest in including in the scope that weren't mentioned in these 14, to provide that either in a written comment or as part of the interview process. And so at this point, I'll defer to you all. So I've got 14 slides coming up that are essentially the detail of those 14 scopes of work. I can go through those. I did email this presentation to you all this afternoon. If you prefer to review it, on your own, and then I can skip to the cost summary. Is there a preference on, how detailed we want to go into for tonight?
Doesn't matter.
You just present it.
Just
Okay.
present, yeah.
So again, these are going to be the detail for each of those 14 scope of work categories, and these are just in order that, we put them in somewhat of a random order. So I'm going to go through in that order that we presented them on the questionnaire. So the first one was purchasing and procurement practices. So you can see from the chart, out of the 5, we got 1 low, 2 moderate, 1 high. And then some of the input and these comments that I'll paraphrase them, but the way that I would phrase them is, these aren't, allegations. These are really, meant to be the interest in including this item in a scope of work. So, reviewing certain areas, that's really what the comments are focused on. And so, again, we're not saying that, Weaver hasn't done any review into any of these. We're just, providing the feedback here. But for purchasing and procurement, generally the comments, are local, state, federal purchasing guidelines being adhered to. The review of district competitive bidding practices, RFQs and RFPs versus, a purchase cooperative and buy board. What is that? What are the practices with that respect? Are they fair and equitable with respect to vendors? Are there any, looking at identifying whether there's any potential conflicts of interest or collusion with respect to vendors? And then reviewing the board authorization, kind of a compliance review to determine whether that there was appropriate board authorization for vendor contracts and extensions. And again, so those were from the written or the more discussion part of in addition to the rankings. The next was construction expenditures. So these were 2 moderate, 3 high. And the general theme here was just the magnitude of expenditures. If we're looking, really it's the $450 million bond from 2017, I think was mentioned by a number of the responses and board members that we spoke to. So this would, include reviewing schedule, any cost overruns or change orders, the allocation and source of funds for within construction projects. So those were some of the comments there. The next one, technology expenditures. These were, mostly 2 low, 2 moderate, 1 that was none. There wasn't a whole lot of comments specific to this one other than, maybe doing a review, for equipment, if there's any missing equipment, kind of a standard kind of inventory. There was some interest in that, and then looking at some of the pricing for more of the technology for classrooms, and then a component of the purchases that were used where federal funds were used, which overlaps into another scope, but not a whole lot of comments on this one. And that same goes for this one, credit card expenditures. These were mostly 2 none, 2 low, 1 moderate. I think a lot of the feedback we got that the district's use of credit cards was, somewhat limited to travel and emergency purchases. I think there was some mention with respect to travel. We do have, a separate cost category or scope category for that one. But that one was primarily low, low or none. And then employee travel, expense reimbursements, these were kind of scattered across, 1 that was none, 1 low, 1 moderate, and then 2 high. One of the, a couple of the comments related to the, I don't know if it's a auto allowance or stipend, but basically the monthly, I've seen it referred to as an auto allowance, but looking at that as far as the policy and procedures related to that practice, looking at the frequency of out of district travel for conferences and training, and then the types of accommodations with respect to maybe GSA standards for like hotels, that sort of thing. So this one was a little bit across the board between the responses. The next one, maintenance expenditures, same thing. We had one that was none, two that were low, one moderate, one high. Not a whole lot of comments. I think in general, just is the district getting the best value? Are the expenses reasonable? Is the staffing levels appropriate? And that was kind of the theme for that category. Next, curriculum and instruction expenditures. So we had two none, two that ranked it low, and then one that ranked high. As far as the comments, general comments here related to, kind of focused on the SPED program with respect to teacher to student ratio, contact hours, use of federal funds within the SPED program. So those were the comments on this one. Transportation expenditures, these were all either 3 none or 2 low. Nothing really specific here as far as comments. And then bond fund expenditures, and again, we probably should have made this the same as construction, without knowing the detail as far as, there are other expenditures that could be included. I think that, what we now know is that the bonds primarily included, new construction for facilities. So, not surprisingly, this was ranked the same as the construction one from earlier with 2 moderate, 3 high. And again, the focus on the 2017 $450 million bond proposition, as far as reviewing everything from the planning process at the beginning, the use of the funds, any cost overruns, the budget, so kind of tracking the actual expenses relative to the budget throughout the process, and if there were any transfers of funds, again, if there's general fund, funds being used to transfer to cover shortfalls. Again, these were some of the comments about, and not surprising, these are the types of things that you would expect to be looking into if you're going to review a bond program. Next is federal funds and grants, which were 1 low, 2 moderate, 2 high. I think in general that it's more of the concern being that there are additional requirements for federal funds as far as the uses, the allowability of those funds, and ensuring that the district is complying with those. Specifically, Title I, ESSER, and is the district fulfilling the requirements to receive those funds? I know that they're much smaller dollar amount, especially in comparison, to the bond funds. But again, I think the concern was more related to the, additional requirements, and is the, district compliant with those. So that's federal funds. Next was athletic expenditures. These were 4 that were none, 1 moderate. And then the only comment here was, potentially reviewing revenues from concessions, and that was really it. But as far as the rankings or the scores go, these were, mostly there were, no concerns or no or interest in looking into this area. Next, employee compensation and stipends. So we had 2 that were low and then 3 that were high. Most of the comments here were specific to stipends, and specifically with respect to board authorization, and then allocation of the stipends and how they're being used. Are they being used as intended? Or the stipends being paid equitably, source of funds for certain positions. Those were some of the comments that we received, but it was primarily the stipends portion of this scope category. The next one is hiring practices. We had 1 low, 1 moderate, and then 3 high. The comments pertain to board authorization for positions that required board approval through the hiring process. Kind of doing a review to track from the evaluations completed by the committee through the recommendations to the HR department and up to the board. Is that process, are the committee evaluations being reflected in the recommendations that ultimately make it to the board, as far as the various committee members and those being aggregated into a decision or a recommendation. And then, really again, just is it equitable and fair, is the district, adhering to best practices with respect to the hiring process? And then this is the final one, is the records and retention practices. So we had 2 that were low, 1 moderate, 2 that were high. Here the comments, are the district's policies and aligned with best practices? Is the district compliant with the local and state and legal policies? Are their records secure? Are records missing? Basically reviewing those types of things were some of the comments and interests with respect to the records and retention. And then, like I said earlier, we also, summarized any comments if there was interest or concerns about anything not already mentioned. These are the summary of those. So in general, we had, board governance, which is fairly broad, but that covers, several different areas. Compliance with Open Meetings Act, board training requirements, and then campus funds, and specifically the fundraiser revenue that was mentioned. So those 4 were the other ones, not in those 14 that were mentioned. And so that's the summary of the rankings, the comments that we've received, through March 24th. And then, as part of this process, the intent is to, work together to determine a scope, and part of that is going to be the cost of it. And so this is, again, not a formal proposal or fee estimate. This is putting our best estimate of numbers, based on, if we assume a 5-year period is what these numbers are based on. And then I'll just show the slide, but essentially what we did was, these are the same 14 in the ranked order, and we took the ones with 10 points or higher. And so I guess the way to think about that is, the average for 10 divided by 5 would be 2, which is equivalent to moderate. So really it's really 7 scopes of work. We combined the bond fund and construction, but these 6 were the ones where the cumulative or aggregate scores were reflective of moderate to high, and so we this is where we just arbitrarily put a cutoff, but this is again something that this is the board's decision. This is really just looking at here's some estimated hours for each of these, and then translated to fees, and then we just did a cumulative column, which is if you were just going to go down by ranking, what it would be. We stopped at those after we got to the ones that were 10 or higher. The hours are, in some respect, kind of aligned to the ranking. They're also, just based on our experience, there's certain areas they're going to be more intensive. For example, hiring practices, which we've done at other school districts. It is a more manual process. It requires more interviews. It's not data driven, and that equates to more hours. And so that's why you'll see, but then you look at federal funds and grants, which again is, 4th on the ranking, but it's, anywhere 6 to 10 million a year, so maybe we'll just say at the high end 50 million over the 5-year period, but relative to 450 million for the bond, it's much smaller, and so that's why the hours are allocated that way. And so again, this is kind of almost to give you a menu, so to speak, of if you choose this, how far down, again, you can, choose just one, or you can choose none, or you can choose more than what we have. And that's really, I guess, where I'll stop here and then get, input from you all and, open it up for discussion.
The campus level expenditures, I proposed that to look into, but it wasn't a general question across the board to look into. We're just looking at the micro level now, when it's already sent out to the different campuses, as well as it's not just the fundraising that we're looking at, it's also the expenditures. Are stipends being created at the campus level to pay teachers? There's questions there that need to be answered, and that's why I included that. Are the grant monies being appropriated properly at that level too? And that's why I added that. Would that be another category we would have to add and discuss, bring forward?
Yeah, and that's a good question. As you were talking, I'm wondering if, because that was something that was mentioned, but it wasn't something that the other board members, would have ranked or reviewed. And I guess
It wasn't listed as a ranking, that's
Right,
why. Yes.
Right, exactly. So it was something that was submitted outside of those 14, so it wouldn't have been on the questionnaire. And so, which I'm not saying it can't be in there. I'm just saying I wonder if it makes sense for the board to rank, the same process, the campus funds, and see where it falls, relative to the ones that were on the questionnaire, just because, it just to make it, that category, if we say we now have 15 categories, and then it would be treated kind of the same as the other 14.
Yes, because you have some here that, like transportation and athletics, that if you need credit cards, you can throw that in there, that really had no response because it wasn't asked. The question was not asked on the campus expenditures.
Right. Yeah, there was not. I mean, if I think there's components of it. The stipends are going to be covered in the employee compensation and stipends.
Even the management of the budget at the campus levels, because
Right.
That's a concern.
So, and again, I don't want to
Yes.
drive. I mean, I want to, make sure we have the board's input. And so I guess what I'm proposing is to have, that specific category, have the board rank and in the same, methodology as these other 14 that were on the questionnaire, just to see, because I don't know where it would fall,
Okay.
with like the standardized scoring system that we have.
Mm-hmm.
Could you drop that under purchasing?
I think there's probably components of it that would fall under purchasing. Yeah, I mean, I think there is, if there's purchases that are, being driven, like if, I don't know how, in some districts it's more consolidated, and some it's, more campus driven, like district-wide T-shirts. If that's driven by the campus, that's, that is part of the purchasing.
Yes, this district was site-based management, sorry.
Okay.
And we need to ensure that they are operating properly too. And that's why the audit would be important for that level.
So, yeah, I think there's within the purchasing, which we've got as sixth, so we would incorporate the review of the campus level expenditures, as to address that concern. Is that kind of cover what you're saying as far as how to include that into the proposed scope? Or
Can you repeat that again?
if we, so like the next step in this process, once the board makes a decision on which of these scopes are going to be included, we're going to put together a detailed work plan where we have,
Okay.
here's what we're going to do for each of these And so we can put some of the purchases that are campus level, into that scope. Because, I mean, I agree that whether it's a purchase by the administration or by the campus, it's part of the purchasing.
It's the overall handling of the budget at the campus level. That's what
Right.
I'm looking at. Was it handled properly the way they requested it? Was it appropriated and portioned out as it was supposed to? So we can ensure that, because there are no financial people working at the campus level. So we need to make sure that the money is going to the right people at the right place and not being moved somewhere else. So I don't know how that would squeeze into this, or it needs its own category.
Right. And like I said, we can, I think in the next step, we're going to put together the detailed work plan, and it's going to have to come back to the board, and so we can include it, and then, then I guess it would be up to the board. But I will include it into the next
The next phase.
narrowed down, work plan.
And then
Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
and then you would have to adjust fees and costs and all that for that, right?
Right, we would, we would then put in a cost estimate for that particular
Yeah.
scope.
Okay, I think that's very important. A majority of the budget goes out to the 50 campuses, and we have to ensure that is properly being handled. We just can't overlook it and, well, we can squeeze it here or there. No, it needs to be its own category.
Okay. Yep, I understand.
Mena?
Yes, Cynthia, you had something?
Mr.
Yes.
Kastner, I'm sorry.
She was first.
Sorry. Mr. Kasner, you mentioned how many items did board members, in addition to the scope that we were presented, additional items were put forward?
So these are the four, the board governance, the, kind of looking at compliance with the Open Meetings Act, which you could argue falls under board governance, same with the board training requirements. And then the campus fund, so that's where that item falls under. So it's four, but you could also maybe say it's two, board governance and campus funds,
Is it possible to have the board rank these items just as we did the other scope, so that we can see where the board feels about each of these items?
I
To
think that,
see about possibly adding them to.
right. I think that would be consistent with the process to this point as far as how, the board is gonna choose. And then I guess one consideration here is that if we have, a different number of responses, than the 5 that we have currently through March 24th, and how we would treat that. But that was, aside from that, issue or, something that we're gonna have to just figure out how to, incorporate. I think that would make the most sense as far as, including that as a aggregated board ranking relative to these other 14.
What we have here is, I think, this high importance
Mr.
from all board members.
Mr. Castellano.
I'm sorry, what?
Mr. Nahara was next. Go ahead, Mr.
My
Nahara.
bad.
Thank you, Mr. Mena. So, Mr. Kastner, I think the question, or the answer to that question is pretty simple. It would just be up to the 5 to rank them. I mean, that's the only way to ensure fairness going forward. If you didn't participate the first time, then you automatically excluded yourself from participating as we continue. Otherwise, the scoring is skewed for these items. My question is, help me understand what the next steps are, only because I want to understand what the scope is, because based on my experience, I would expect that some of the concerns that are being raised would naturally be addressed in the audit. For example, if we're looking at procurement processes, you would do a random sampling. If the purchase happens to be out of the DSC, well, then we would evaluate the process here. But, if you just look, we've got 50 campuses, 1 DSC, so many of the purchases would be initiated from the campuses. And as we generate a random sample, we will identify campuses made at the purchase level or expenditures, whether it be for a stipend or any type. So naturally, they will be incorporated in that audit. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would agree that if we're the purchasing and procurement, again, it's intended to cover the district-wide, campus level, central administration. And so the next step would be, if we identify which of these scopes are going to be, included, and then we will, basically break out, here's the work steps for these. So for purchasing and procurement, it would be, for the 5-year review period, reviewing the, purchases, a sample across the 50 campuses and, the central office, and then, reviewing practices and policies and, a sample of actual transactions and seeing, how they were procured. Was there competitive bidding? Was there, 3 quotes obtained, that sort of thing. So we would break that out and then provide that fee estimate for that, scope.
Mr. Kastner, is it understanding that, well, if you can go back to the categories, I think you said there were 7 of them, right? Or 6 scopes of work because 2 of them are combined in
Right.
the bond and construction.
Correct.
Is it too much to ask for you to provide us what each of this scope entails before we make a decision on what, on which ones we would like to move forward with? Because I think, at least from my perspective, it would be important to understand exactly what each one of these areas incorporates to make sure that as we select it, that it's actually gonna review the areas that we'd like to review.
Yeah, and I can touch on some of that now, and then, I think ultimately we're gonna prepare a more refined document to list those. That's gonna go, back to the board. But I can walk through, kind of generally what we would include. And then again, if there's items that I didn't mention, part of this is to make sure that we are addressing, it doesn't really help us if we're including the scope, but not the specific, concerns within that scope category as far as the intent of this process to address, review the areas that are of highest priority to this board. And so, yeah, I guess absolutely it's, we want to make sure we're covering, even within the scope, those areas that are of concern or interest to the board.
Okay. I just would be very interested in seeing it in writing because, when it comes to scopes, if it's not written, then it's not included. So it doesn't matter really what we discussed.
Right.
If it's not documented in the scope, then, it's naturally excluded or out of bounds of what the scope is. Looking at the fees, I can see, Mr. Kastner, that the hourly fee is about $250 an hour. So is that inclusive of all personnel? What type of team are we going to get for each of these?
Yeah, and that's for the rates for, we have a kind of a reduced government rate. I use a blended rate for estimating purposes, but it's going to be, it's kind of a pyramid where we're, trying to, associate and senior associate, try to, have 40-50% of the hours in those where their rates are, in the 180, the lower compared to 250. And then, there's going to be a manager level and then myself. And so the manager level, myself, we're going to be over the 250, but we're going to have less hours, percentage-wise. And so what we've seen in the past is it typically will kind of come out to be around 250 for the team as a whole.
Okay, so that makes sense. It's a blended rate based on the composition of the team. So what's the composition of the team?
So that's going to be myself. That's going to be Jared Jordan is probably going to be involved on a very high level basis. So I don't think he's going to have a whole lot of hours. And then Anthony.
Mr. Kastner, instead of names, maybe roles instead?
Okay,
That way?
sure. So my level, managing director, we're going to have a manager level, and then we're going to have at least one associate, and then maybe 2, but that could be, we've got a senior associate or another associate. So we have, I think it's going to depend on how many scopes we, ultimately include, but I think there's going to be a core team of 3 people, an associate, a manager, and then myself, managing director.
And then the blended rate, does that include travel and other out-of-pocket, or is that in addition to the blended rate?
So we typically do not bill, unless we're asked to be on site for extended period of time, if we're like I'm coming up today, like we typically don't charge those to the client. If we're having to be here for 2 weeks with, staying in a hotel and airfare, and I think what our engagement letter states for the phase one is that we actually will obtain approval on any travel expenditures before we, incur them or, submit them to the district. And we typically don't need to be on site for extended periods of time. So I guess in an ideal world, there would not be travel fees or expenses. But if there are, we'll make sure we approve those with the district first.
Sounds good. And then, so as you're evaluating some of these, is it mostly based on, documentation that other individuals are going to have to obtain for you? Or do you also, say, observe in like actual practices? So if you're looking at a purchase, let's just say, because that's easy, right? Do you look at past performance and then maybe actually go observe the activity to make sure that that's still the way that it's happening right now? Or
Typically, we're focused on the transactions that are going to be within the review period. So if we, for this 5-year period, it would be,
Right.
July 1 through June 3rd, July 1, 2017 through June 30, 2022. So we wouldn't look at current transactions unless, if that's, again, something that, is asked of us, and the board wants us to, but the way it's currently,
Right.
Envisioned, it would be, and the other thing I'll say too is it is a combination of, ideally we can get, our own remote or, audit account for, the management systems, and get, we can then pull a lot of the records ourselves. I think there's some that, especially with hiring processes and HR records, we're, tend to be more reliant on district personnel to pull those. But a lot of the financial, if we're talking about purchase orders, invoices, contracts, requisitions, quotes and all the procurement records, if we can, depending on if they're electronic or if they're scanned into some kind of, management system, electronic management system, then we can get those pretty easily and have access to those without having to, have somebody standing at the copier for, 2 weeks.
okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, Mr. Castellano?
Yes, we talked about 2 different additions. You want to go back to the screen? Previous. There you go. About board governance and campus funds. These were a concern big enough for board members to bring it to your attention, but they weren't included in the initial checklist. Including these 2 items and bringing it before the board to whatever, agree or rate them or rank them, how long will it take to continue the process of initiating your internal audit or your forensic audit?
So my understanding is that the April 18th board meeting is kind of the target date for, if this was a discussion only agenda item, that April 18th would be, the board would be reviewing a formal proposal and fee
Okay.
estimate. I would hope that we can stay on track with that, with going through the process of adding or getting soliciting the ranking information for these 2 additional scope items. If you think that's not reasonable, or the board thinks that's not enough time, we can get that.
I believe it's more than enough time, but are we going to require another meeting like this to include the other 2, these other 2 items?
I think if we agree on the process, I don't think it's, well, I don't want to speak for the board, but my personal opinion, if we agree that the process and the methodology for how we're going to go about them, and then we'll provide the updated ranking, and if we have a sense of, and again, this next fee estimate, we can provide for all 16 of them, we can provide, here's the work steps, here's the fee estimate based on what we know at this point, and then the board can choose from that more detail. That'll be more of a formal proposal, whereas this is the, intent of it is for discussion purposes to get, input, and share this information, because I know that each individual board member wouldn't have, until now, the information about the board for those that responded, and share that so that we can,
So you're saying-
collectively make a
You're saying by
decision.
the next regular board meeting, we should have all this ironed out and ready for approval?
Is that the 18th, the April 18th meeting?
I believe so.
If, we can set up the soliciting the rankings for these other two, this evening. I can send, I think it's just gonna be an email, and I'll ask each board member just to either call me or send me an email just to myself, and then we can update, this slide. And then what I'm envisioning is a document where each of these will be 16 scopes. We'll have them in ranked order, and then we will get, put detail as far as, the work steps for each of these and a fee estimate, and then that'll be the formal proposal. And then I guess whether you decide now or at that point about what the actual scopes are, that's why I was proposing we'll just kind of do the detail for all of them, and then, let the board decide at April 18th, unless, we get, that's something that is hashed out through this discussion. But again, you're not gonna know the rankings for the other two today, so that's the only caveat there.
Mr. Mena. Mayor,
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Matas.
quick comment. I know this is an extremely important concern or agenda item. However, this is also going to cost approximately $3 million. I'm just calculating, basically. Is that
Well, 3 million, or there's the number here for the 7 scopes of work.
this is all? Could you explain that then on the cost? Because down here you've got
Sure. Yep, and
you've
again, I
got
didn't want to put
almost 300,000 per item here from 8 through 13.
Yeah, okay. So that's the cumulative fees. I probably should have just zeroed that out after the box below.
Yeah, when I saw that, I just thought that just.
Yeah, we didn't provide any fee estimate, so it's basically 0 for the ones, starting at employee travel, and then down. We didn't provide a fee estimate, because we're,
So could it possibly cost $3 million when you're done?
Uh,
Just calculating from the items 8 through 13 that you hadn't?
Oh, you mean if we do provide a fee estimate for
Correct.
all 16 scopes?
Yes, sir.
Well,
I calculated
The-
it
the
just based
whole-
on what you,
right. And the whole reason we did phase 1 was to narrow the focus so that it doesn't end up being $3 million. And
Yes,
and I'll go back to that, excuse me. I'll go back to that. Is it possible, is this something that we can discuss to where we can do this in phases, cover everything but break it up so we're not incurring that cost, especially this time of the year?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's really
Just a
the,
quick comment. I just wanted to make that clear.
yeah,
Thank you.
we're flexible, if that's the direction, you want to break it up in phases. We want to, narrow the scope and identify a scope and define a scope that is, represents the interests of the board. And so whatever that is, this is the process that we've used in the past to try to solicit that. So if that's the way that, we can absolutely do that.
So basically,
Wait,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Nahara is next.
That's all right.
You're fine?
Go ahead, Michael.
No, I'm good, sir.
Good?
No, seriously, go
So
ahead.
basically, if we do the top 6, it's gonna cost $293,750. That's your estimate, right?
Yes.
That's the, preliminary estimate. We
Yes.
haven't, requested any documents yet, or we don't know how much of the documents are electronic versus scanned, but, just,
It's an estimate.
it's
yeah.
an estimate.
And then to include, we'll add the campus expenditures and the other, the board, I forgot the term, board
The board governance.
governance,
right.
there you go. That would be an additional cost to this, but not to exceed $3 million, right?
Yeah, if it is.
Okay.
I mean, I've never seen a forensic audit cost $3 million. The most, I think,
I just got a question. So when you add the 87,500 to the 56,250, that equals to 143,750, right? Just simple math.
I'm sorry, can you, one more time?
When you add the 87,500 to the 56,250 equals 143,750, right?
So it's cumulative.
Just making sure it's simple math.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep.
Okay. Yeah, I know the process has been going on since July of 2021. We're still waiting to get it finalized here. We're in 23. And I don't want to be July 2023 when this thing gets off the ground. So we can do it by April board meeting and get it approved. Let's do that.
And what I will commit to doing is, let's say if we get the ranking information from the 5 board members, this week or next week, I will, once we have that, we can really, put this together and try to get it to the board, as early as we can, so it can be reviewed before, I know this was a function of, we went through Friday to solicit information, we put this together, from Friday till now, this, we would like to ideally give this information to the board in advance, at least a week in advance to review. But again, that's a function of, if we can get the ranking information for those 2, and I'll send that email out to the board this evening, if that works, just to make sure we're on our end doing what we can to, keep that process moving forward as expeditiously as we can.
It'll only be to the 5 that responded, correct?
I'm sorry?
It'll only be to the 5 that responded?
Correct.
I mean, the board, the sooner we get this back to Mr. Kasner, the sooner he can get our proposal ready for us. So if he gets it out tomorrow, we should be able to get it we should be able to answer it by Friday at the latest. Don't y'all think?
Yes.
Correct.
And we'll just make it, it can be just a email response, it'll do the same, it'll be the same criteria, and then, what we'll provide in, is hopefully a week before April 18th will be, for 16 items, here's the, detailed work steps. Usually it's a, bullet form, and then what the estimated fees are, assuming, the 5-year review period, and then that will give, and again, we were, I don't think the intent was to do all 16 of these scopes by any means. That's again, so from that point, they'll have some time in advance of April 18th to, give some thought into which ones, again, we have the rankings to kind of help guide that process. But, again, this is the board, it's really important for the board to be, involved in the direction of scoping this forensic audit, to make sure it's meeting the priorities of the board and the cost expectations and time expectations and so forth.
I got a question.
Go ahead.
So it's only a 5-year review scope, but let's just say you find something that, I don't know, state, federal, local, the statute of limitation goes 7 years, 10 years, 8 years, whatever it may be, depending on, what has been done. Will you go back as far as that, or will you come back to the board for approval if that's going to require more funding for that?
I think we would, anything that, is substantially outside of the scope that's agreed to by the board, we would come back to the board. I think there's probably some, the bond program that I think started in early 2017 from the planning probably was 2016, but that bond program that carried through, there was a high concern, if we approve the review of the bond fund, the bond proposition from 2017, and I think we can include that in the detailed scope that we present on April 18th, that would also include the bond planning, which may proceed, July 1, 2017. But if there's, substantial review area transactions that are prior to June 1 or July 1, 2017, I think we would need to bring that to the board, if it's substantially outside of the scope, just to make sure that we're getting, authorization for a non-scope item.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and I will send that email out this evening, and thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Moving on to item B. Presentation of FY 2023-24 revenue estimates of preliminary budget. Ms. Vicky Perez.
President Mena, members of the board, Dr. Carmen, Vicky Perez, I am CFO, and you should have a PowerPoint with you in front of you, along with some attachments, and I'll give you a little brief synopsis of what those are for. So we're going to go over what we've done so far as part of our budget process. This is part of our calendar. And we have completed the department and campus budget reviews. We have completed staffing reviews. We are currently compiling our budget amounts, and we have completed department request for additional funds. This is part of our calendar. It is a very fluid calendar, so we tried to stick to it as much as possible so we can have a guideline. Probably the only things that will deviate are maybe workshop dates, depending on the availability of the board. Our current economic conditions, our inflation rate, which is the equivalent of a cost of living increase. In 2022, we were at 8.8%. 2023, we anticipate it'll be about 6.6%, and by 2024, it will be about 4.3%. That's based off of the predictions from Wall Street Journal. Interest rates will drop approximately 3 points from 6.5 to 3.5 by December 2024. Cost of services and supplies are still increasing due to the supply chain restrictions. And our current cost of oil is $72 a barrel. And the reason I bring that up is because Texas is oil rich, and a lot of our budget is based off of the amounts of oil that we're getting and what the value of it is. So to give you some perspective, in 2022, the cost of oil per barrel was $100. In 21, it was $70. And in 2020, during the pandemic, it was $40. Quick synopsis of what our Senate profile looks like. We have 23 men, 8 women, 19 Republicans, 12 Democrats, 25 incumbents, and 6 new members. So this is a very brief synopsis of what the legislative topics are at this point. As you know, we are in the 88th legislative session. That is going to have a big impact on what our budget looks like. Right now, the numbers we have are completely preliminary because I'm basing it based off of what we currently have, and legislative session is going to do whatever they want to do. And so by the end of May, we should be able to see what they plan on doing, which doesn't necessarily correlate with our budget adoption, which is in June. So we can anticipate that whatever we're doing here, it will definitely come back in July so that we can amend based off of those legislative initiatives. So this packet right here that you have in front of you, this is a current list of the bills that are at the House and Senate, and I have alphabetized them by topic so that it's easy to sift through. I do not expect you to go through each of those right now, but I wanted to make sure you had that, so just in case you were interested. Some of the main ones right now are enrollment versus attendance. As you know, it doesn't matter what our attendance rate is, we prepare for our enrollment amount. And so they are looking at maybe, I'm hoping that they will be this legislative session will be able to fund us based on an average of enrollment as opposed to ADA. We have seen about, at the very least, 8 bills for basic allotment. The current amount is $6,160 per student. They are looking at how we can raise that so that it can help maintain our pay increases, our inflation rate, and help with operations. I don't anticipate that it will be a very big amount, but there are some stipulations that are on some of the bills that says if we increase by X amount, a percentage will go towards this, and a percentage of that percentage will go towards that. So there's different scenarios. The information that we're getting from the state, from TEA, it is allowing us to plan for that accordingly. But at this point, we don't know what they're going to do. Some other changes that are being considered are the bilingual allotment. They will possibly include additional costs, whether it's to enable smaller class size or to include an alternate language. CTE, the current funding percentage that we have to spend is 55%. They are looking at possibly increasing that to 65%. So whatever the allotment is, 65 of that will go to CTE, and possibly including 5th and 6th grade. So that would be a lot more funding and a lot more opportunities for our students as well, if that goes through. CCMR, the College Career Military Readiness, they're looking at possibly increasing the special ed bonus from $2,000 to $4,000. Homestead exemption, which will have a very direct impact on what our revenues look like locally, maybe increasing it from $40,000 to $65,000 or $100,000 on our homestead exemption. Maintenance and operation tax rates. There are so many different bills on what they want to do, including capping it, ending it, all kinds of interesting things. At this point, I think the one that will probably impact us the most is going to be the maximum compressed rate. They are possibly going to decrease that an additional 15 cents. If that happens, we will most likely keep our current tax rate, move those pennies over to INS, and pay down a lot of our debt. School safety, we have 16 House bills on school safety. I'm very encouraged by that because that means that we will be able to have additional funds for our students. And I'm hoping that it's going to be something that everybody can benefit from. They do have different variations of requirements or suggestions or allotments. So that one is one of the bigger ones. Special education has not been addressed by House Bill 3 when they did this in the last two legislative sessions ago. So this one will be revisited. Hopefully that we can see that there will be an increase on the transportation amount for special ed, along with a bunch of various little caveats that we might have to do in there. There are various allotments that are being discussed, including a mental health allotment, residencies, UIL allotments, fine arts allotments. There's a lot of new propositions out there. So we'll see which ones stick, which ones don't, and we'll be happy to share that with the students. And then, of course, vouchers. I know y'all have heard about that. We have 9 bills that I've seen personally with the vouchers, and I personally want to thank y'all for the work that y'all have been doing for advocating for our students at the Capitol. I think it's very important that we work as a united front for that. So thank you very much for that. All right, I'm going to go over some of our assumptions. As you know, a budget is based off of possibilities and rainbows, and so what we have right now, the information that you have in front of you, is based off of our PEMS data, and it's mostly an average. So our enrollment as of March 2023 was 48,055. Average in the past few years, we have seen approximately a 1.6% increase. So I have factored in for that amount, which correlates very closely with what we're seeing. We're seeing about an 800 student increase from one year to another. So our projected enrollment is 48,824. But as you know, we get paid based off of our average daily attendance. Our average percentage of attendance is 94.2, so that leaves us with an ADA of 45,997. So whenever I work out this big, ugly worksheet called the Summary of Finance, that's my target number. Our Tier 1 funding. This is the main part of our foundation school program. Again, basic allotment is $61.60. Hopefully we can see that increased. I've seen some numbers like 6,500, 7,000. It could be very minimal, it could be very big. Either way, it's gonna have a direct impact on what we're getting as our taxes and what we're spending on our students. It could go either way. Just know that whatever they decide to do, the state is always good about equalizing. So if they do something with our taxes, they're going to raise that funding from the state. If there's something that's affecting our taxes poorly, then we're going to receive less taxes, but we will get some more from the state. It will always equalize. So some of the special populations that we're looking at are early education allotment, CCMR, dyslexia, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go over all of them. And I will give you an opportunity to look at the Tier 1 funding, see if there's any questions. This, again, is based off of the Summary of Finance worksheet. And so when you're looking at this, remember we're talking about the CTE, that is Program Intent 22. It is currently a 55% amount. They might increase that to a 65, which will give us more for CTE as well. There are various propositions that may come out. It could change this from one day to another. Probably tomorrow as we speak, they're changing it. And then the Tier 2 funding, these are the excess, the enrichment pennies. And this is based off of our weighted average daily attendance. So I'll give you a chance to look at that. That's an additional $38.8 million with weighted average daily attendance at $126.21. So we'll go over property values because this directly affects what our budget looks like. We are seeing approximately about, if I'm not mistaken, a 3% increase. I could be wrong about that number. I don't want to say that incorrectly, but the number at the very bottom is what our appraised property value is. It's at $14.8 billion. This is a preliminary number. The appeals are in process right now, and the final report is due July 25th. So that lines up with us adopting our tax rate in August. So what I work with is the preliminary property value study amounts. I just wanted to show a trend of where we are. So if they do decrease the tax rates, we do have a higher tax base. So, and then again, the state will equalize those with the state funding. Enrollment and ADA. I also wanted to give you a visual of what our enrollment versus our ADA looks like over the last 4 years. And then the revenues. These are the amount of revenues that we have collected for maintenance and operation, as well as interest and sinking in previous years. And you're going to see that there is a decrease in the INS for the next year. That is because we have paid down some of our debt. We are trying to close out as much as possible so that we can prepare for more debt. That's what we do. This is going to reflect approximately a 1.6% increase from last year to this year, which directly correlates with the amount of students that we increase from one year to another. And then lastly, we'll go over what we plan on doing on our April budget workshop. We will review revenue estimates information. That's just whatever's come down the legislative pipeline. Our cost drivers and our preliminary general fund budget. Some of the cost drivers that I can see already is going to be increases, obviously. We have 4 new academies that are coming up, and whatever plans we have as far as the cycled fields or whatever, whatever plan we have, the long-term plan that we have on that one. And then our future budget schedule based off of the budget calendar, we have the April 18th. May 9th, we will have a presentation of the detailed budget. The 26th, you should receive your draft budget book. June 6th, we will discuss the budget book. June 20th, we'll have a public hearing and hopefully adopt the 23-24 budget. And then in August, we will adopt the tax rate. Any questions? I have given y'all a couple of other inserts, including one from TASB, as well as a timeline for the legislative session. I think it's important that y'all know that those dates are coming up, and it kind of helps with where we are with the budget as well.
Go ahead, Mr. Nakata.
On the, as you were going through some of the legislative topics of interest,
Yes, sir.
you, for example, said vouchers. There's 9 different bills. I see that on the attachment, you have provided a column that labels, you know, what each one is specific to. So if we were to go to that attachment, we could see which 9 bills are associated with vouchers or any of the other categories, if we wanted to look at those in further detail.
Yes, sir.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Would you like for me to email it? Because there is a hyperlink to that, and that y'all can go in there and see those hyperlinks and all the details if you wish.
I think that would be great.
That would be good.
Thank you.
Good.
That is-
Anybody else? Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, now we will go into new business. I do have a speaker first on item A, Ms. Liz Ramos, but let me read special board meeting. The board encourages comments from members of the public. However, the primary purpose of this meeting is to conduct district business. Therefore, to ensure efficient conduct of this meeting, all speakers must comply with the following rules. Address the board at all times. Only persons who have timely signed up to speak will be called to speak. Comments should pertain to the district issues only or business in accordance to board policy. Respect the rights of others, display civility, decorum, and refrain from using harmful language and offensive content such as defamatory, obscene, and fighting words or gestures. Complaints should be referred to a grievance policy. Do not engage in conduct that disrupts or delays this meeting. Each speaker is legally responsible for the content and consequences of his or her own statements. In order to have enough time to complete all items on this agenda, each speaker will be given 5 minutes. And if a person speaks on multiple agenda items, not more than a total of 5 minutes. All speakers, including those who sign up to speak on agenda items, will be called to speak during open forum. The presiding officer would take all necessary measures to ensure that an order and decorum is preserved during the meeting. We expect all persons to properly comply with the presiding officer's directives. By law, the board cannot discuss or act on any item which is not posted on the agenda. Therefore, thank you. We will thank you for your cooperation, and let's proceed. At this time, and the item that we are discussing is discussion and possible action on the reclassification of the special education clerks from 304 to 305. At this time, Ms. Liz Ramos.
Okay. Good evening, President Mena, Superintendent Dr. Carmen, and members of the board. Many of you already know me, as I have spoken several times on behalf of myself and my colleagues. My name is Elizabeth Ramos. I have worked in the district for almost 23 years. I am a special education clerk at Americas High School and a proud member of West Texas Alliance. I was pleasantly surprised to see that the issue of reclassification of our position was on the agenda tonight. As I have stated before, our group of clerks is hardworking and dedicated to this position, this department, this district, and most especially to these students. Our job description was changed on December the 2nd, 2022. But prior to that, one of the education requirements was an associate's degree or 48 college credit hours. Many of us had that or even a bachelor's degree. The change also included the removal of classroom coverage substitution during ARDs. Although these two items were removed, does not mean that our workload was lessened or that we did not sacrifice anything in order to obtain our education. On the contrary, we have been advocating for this change for the last several years because the position has evolved significantly. The local, state, and federal documentation for special education has increased tremendously. The population needing special education services continues to grow at an unprecedented pace. All of these factors contribute to the high level of accountability that our position requires us to maintain. While the major responsibilities and duties have increased, the special education ratios continue to surpass the recommended amount of one clerk for 140 students. This amount may have been doable in the past, but with the increased amount of documentation, many of us are surpassing the 140 student amount. The majority of our clerks serve 2 campuses, and those of us at the high school have over 140 recommended students. I know our president, Ms. Rosie Perez, emailed you the documentation recently submitted for our reclassification. I still welcome you to come visit our campuses to see what we do on a daily basis, and I ask for your serious consideration of the approval of our position from a 304 pay grade to a 305 pay grade, retroactive to the beginning of the school year. As always, we truly appreciate the work that you do for our students, our employees, and our district. Mr. Barrera, thank you for your constant support in this endeavor since we began this process last year. And thank you, Mr. Morales and Mr. Guerra, for assuring that this item was placed on the agenda today. Thank you all.
Okay, at this time, Dr. Gonzalez and Selena Stiles, can you please present this item to us, please?
Good evening, Board President Mr. Mena, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Dr. Carmen. This item was requested by Trustee David Morales, and Ms. Stiles will present some backup information for you.
Good evening, President Mena, Dr. Carmen, members of the board. I know that some information was shared with you all on Friday in relation to this topic. So as requested, I'm just going to go through some of the information, background information. The reclassification is to go from a 304 to a 305. There are a total number of 35 special education clerks currently in that position. And the total budget impact is $28,340.64. Are there any questions?
Is there any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I had asked for something similar a while back. When I got the response that I got was just, oh, there was nothing according to TASB having this information. So I'm glad that we brought it up, but I'm still gonna make the motion that we go from a 304 to a 306. And I'm gonna say why. The amount of work that they do on a daily basis, and it's been said that we should go and see it. I've seen it firsthand personally. The amount of work, the paperwork. They also check, they set up the ARDs, they check the paperwork from the diagnosticians, everybody who's done the testing, making sure the art is gonna run smoothly and that the parents receive the proper information and that there's no violations of FERPA, anything like that. So, like I said, I think it's well-deserved, I think it's overdue, but like I said, I make the motion to change it from a 305 to a 306.
Second the motion.
Got a quick comment. Selena, did you have any more to say on that, on the
No, sir.
topic? Okay, did the agenda item went from a 304 to 305?
Correct. That was
And I
what was
requested
requested.
that
Yes, sir.
from y'all. I want, because I do know that they're deserving. There's no doubt about it. I realize the roles they have, and the importance to the SPED process. I realize that. Is it possible that I think ultimately this is going to benefit our children all the way through. The kids are going to benefit from this with this. But I just wanted to make sure that did we budget for this? How can we justify going from 304 to 306? Can you explain that to us before? Yeah,
Okay, so I don't have the actual budget impact of what that will cost.
because I know we had it tonight, and that's what we were basing this off.
Correct.
So
So
for us to jump
I-
like that, it'd be difficult for us to justify it, you know, on a whim like this. I just want to make that comment, not to say that they don't deserve it.
I've looked at similar job descriptions, Mr. Morales, and a 306 is very comparable to the type of work that they do. Very comparable.
But as far as the monetary impact, I know they've already did the research. I asked them as far as what it's going to cost. I mean, yeah, down the road, I think maybe we can do that, but right now we have to be responsible
Well-
and look at it for what it is. But that's my comment. Anyone else could chime in.
Anybody want to speak on that? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mena. With the agenda item stating to go from a 304 to a 305, we do have the information, as Mr. Morales stated, on that amount. At this moment, we don't know what the monetary cost to the district would be. And I think it would be irresponsible of this board to just throw that out there without knowing how much it's going to cost the district. Could we do it at a later time to raise them to a 306? Yes, but at this moment, tonight, with the information we have right now, I think that's what we have to do, just simply because we don't have the information to change it from this agenda item.
What is the hourly rate from a 306 or 305?
I don't have that information offhand with me, sir. I don't have the pay scale with me for a 306.
No, she's at a 305,
I don't have it with me.
but that's what you're presenting.
Correct. So I'm presenting the budget impact.
Yes, but the hourly rate, that's,
I don't have that information, sir. I don't know the minimum hourly rate or the midpoint or the maximum off the top of my head.
I know you guys are on your phone, we can look it up real quick, no?
Somebody has it right there. So the 305 minimum hourly rate is a $16.92, midpoint $20.28, max $23.64. We go to the 306, it's roughly about $1.20 at the minimum rate. If from the midpoint, you're looking at another $1.50. So the average is about $1.50.
I would say the only issue is that the calculation here is not simple math. You have people with years of experience, and while I don't agree that we should consider, I don't disagree, I'm sorry, that we should consider 306. We have the information before us that tells us exactly how many employees, what the impact is, and the proposal was to move folks from 304 to 305. We have all the relevant information. I think it would be extremely foolish, with the responsibility that we are charged with, fiscal responsibility of this school district, to move something without having the adequate information. If we put from 305 to 306 at the very next board meeting and make that effective retroactive, we can do that as well. But what we can do here is make a decision from 304 to 305 with the proper information that was provided to us, make that applicable retroactively, and if we want to move them to 306, then we can see that done at the very next board meeting. But to do anything other than 304 to 305, considering that that's the only information we've been given, I think is irresponsible.
We're gonna stick to 306.
So I do have a motion by Mr. Barrera and a second by Mr. Castellano. There is a motion on the floor to go from a 304 to 306. Is there any more discussion on this?
Disappointed that that's what the motion is. Having absolutely no financial information, especially
Then
that
you
we are
tell the-
charged
you
with the
tell the
fiscal
kids
response.
no.
Excuse me. I let you say your portion, so please do not interrupt me.
But you're gonna be condescending.
I'm not being condescending, I'm stating a matter of fact. Did you receive, Mr. Barrera, can you tell us exactly what the financial impact is?
I think we have a pretty good idea if you do simple math.
Mr. Barrera, can you tell me what the financial impact is?
I think I can be
Okay.
pretty damn close.
So-
If you give me the time to do it.
Mr. Barrera, then, another statement of fact is asking us to make a decision with a pretty darn good estimate of what the impact is going to be. No further discussion from me.
Can I also speak? Once again, I think that if we can reconsider and just bring this back, I do know, we all agree that they are deserving, there's no doubt about it. But we owe it to the public, to the community members here to make sure that we make decisions that are responsible. And right now, we really got to think about this. And once again, we don't want to be the bad guys. We want to benefit, and hopefully this will benefit the children, our special ed population. That's what we're here for. We got to remember that. We're here for that. And the decisions we make, those are going to have impact. And if this is something that we're discussing right now, I would really like for us to be responsible at this point and possibly reconsider it and bring it back. Today, we can go with what we proposed, the item at hand, and then at the end of the month, we come back, look at it, look at the exact budget impact it'll have, and then from there we can do it. I think 3 weeks, I think that's responsible. So if you can reconsider, it'd be a good.
Budget impact is about 55,000.
Yeah.
Mr. Mena,
Go ahead.
we're not saying that nobody is denying the 305. I think we can all agree to that. But I think on our budget impact right now and what's on the agenda is from 304 to 305. I agree with Mr. Nahara was saying, we could bring it back next month. Well, at the end of the month of April, so we could get an exact dollar amount, so we could be transparent and accountable to our taxpayers. We're not saying we're going to deny it going back, but I think the fiscal responsibility thing to do is we don't want to get a guesstimate and say it's going to cost us $50,000, and then next month it's going to be $75,000. If we wait 3 weeks, and we approve right now from a 304 to 305, we wait till April 18th, and from there go to 306, and then we know the exact dollar amount. I think that's the best thing to do for us to be fiscal responsibility. Fiscal responsible.
I think our example of fiscal responsibility was in the last board meeting when we wanted to add another $200,000 to catering services. I think we showed where our priorities were there. Mr. Barrera's motion showing our priorities here as a couple of board members here, so that's what I have to say.
I guess we don't understand maybe then the function of the bids, because the bids are only an approval to spend that money. It doesn't mean that the campuses actually have to go out there and spend that money. It's just to give our vendors an estimate of what the impact is going to be or what the potential spend is going to be, so that when we obtain pricing for those bids, then we receive discounts based on the possible dollar amount.
That was in a
No,
contract.
The
I'm sorry, are we
potential
supposed to be talking
expenditures
about
that's gonna be
items
here
that
is
are not-
Please ask to
55,000.
speak, guys, please ask to speak. I need to maintain order. Go ahead, Mr. Barrera.
So the possible expenditure that we're gonna incur here is about 55,000.
Mr. Morales, you had something to say?
Just wanted to keep to the agenda item. We're going off, we're talking
Call for
about
vote.
other items that went on. You know, they're relevant, of course, but I
Call for
believe that
vote.
we need to stay with.
Okay. So now there's a motion on the table to go from 304 to 306. The motion was made by Mr. Barrera and the second by Mr. Castellano. Okay, at this time, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion does not pass.
Motion to reclassify special education clerks from 304 to 305.
Wait a minute, you didn't go who's against it.
Second.
Those opposed?
No. Call to order. Hey, we didn't, you have to ask who's against it, because a silent vote is a yes vote.
Okay, let's redo it then. Going back to Mr. Barrera's motion to go from 304 to 306. Second by Mr. Castellano. All those in favor, raise your hand. 2. All those opposed, raise your hand. Motion does not pass.
I'll make a motion.
Motion
then
to reclass of special
reclassify
education
from a
clerks from
304
304 to
I
305.
started speaking.
Wait a
first.
minute, guys. Wait a minute. But Mr. Nájera had already started it before you.
So then we didn't follow the order.
What do you mean? He had replaced
So
it
you-
already before you started.
It was my motion right now.
Yes, and your motion didn't go through.
Okay, so then we restarted, so then now, just because somebody spoke ahead, they get it back? Or is it a,
Generally how it works.
Yeah, because he had already started it. Okay? Go ahead, Mr. Nájera.
Motion to reclassify special education clerks from 304 to 305.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Nájera to reclassify the clerks from 304 to 305. A second by Mr. Morales. And now I have a discussion.
so then will you amend your motion to add to the next board meeting to change it from a 305 to 306?
We will just put that in the next board meeting.
I think that's pretty
Yeah.
clear.
I want to make sure that it's
It-
right here,
it'll-
it's documented. If there's not a problem,
You're on the
You're
executive.
on executive
Yeah,
committee.
it'll go on there, believe me. You're on the executive, I'm on the executive, and so is Mr. Morales.
And this
So-
is- for the
and this
record, that's
payment
all
is
it has to be for.
retroactive to the beginning of the year? That's what we
It's
discussed?
not right.
Retroactive.
Is it retroactive? That's what I'm asking, Mr. Mena. Mr. Morales?
Budget, was that considered in the
That's
proposal?
the entire year's budget
Okay, yes.
impact.
Put that in your motion?
I didn't make the motion.
That was
Oh, Mr.
already,
Nájera.
Mr.
Sorry
Nájera,
about
I
that.
second it though.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, sir.
It's my understanding it's part-
Retroactive.
but retroactive, but I will amend the motion for it to state retroactive.
okay, Mr. Barrera. Mr. Nájera, at this time, you made the motion to go from 304 to 305, retroactive. Second by Mr. Morales. All those in favor, raise your hand. All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Go ahead. Mr.
just to be clear, Claudia, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and place on the agenda for the regular board meeting for April, the consideration to go from 305 to 306 for these impacted clerks, for consideration by the executive committee to place onto the regular board agenda.
Okay, moving on to new business B, consider approval of requests for extensions. Vicky Perez?
Good evening again. We have 4 extensions for your consideration. We have request for extension on the depository contract, the filters and accessories, painting material, and pump and motor services. Are there any questions?
Better, so we're going to take them individually, or Mr. Mena, are we going to take them individually or as a group? Item B or individually?
New business, we normally do.
What's the fastest?
Well, but it's under
to
new
state to
business,
standard practice.
new business, so they would be taken individually.
Individually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to.
Okay, so are any questions regarding the consideration for the depository for district funds?
Motion to approve?
Second.
One comment, real quick.
Go ahead, Mr. Castellano.
Ms. Pettis, I appreciate you attaching the review. I reviewed them thoroughly, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I have a motion by Ms. Nájera. Who seconded that? You did, Mr. Nájera? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, B1, district funds, RFP number E214.
B2.
B2,
E.
E, that's what I said, E214.
Yeah, talking-
What?
Sorry, I don't. Go
Any
ahead.
questions regarding the filters and accessories?
Motion to approve?
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Nájera, second by Mr. Nájera. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Abstain.
One abstention by Mr. Guerra. Motion carries. Number 2, filters and accessories, RFP number,
We
oh,
just
that's the
did
same
three.
one.
We're on three.
P3, painting.
Number 3, painting, painting material.
Not down here. I don't see that here. Okay, I'll read it from here. Painting materials, RFP number E2237.
As with the other one, sir, I am more than happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Motion to approve?
Second.
A motion by Mr. Nájera, a second by Mr. Morales. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Number 4, pump and motor services and repair, RFP number E2121.
I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Nájera, a second by Mr. Morales. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
I abstain.
One abstention by Mr. Guerra. Motion carries.
Thank you.
All right, guys, I will now adjourn the meeting. The time is 7:21.